The way we disseminate health knowledge, absolutely critical for understandings of health. And has that changed or hasn't it changed? And then my participation in the health sector is the other measure. So these are ways of measuring progress. And what progress have we made over the last 25 years? First of all, life expectancy, and this is Maori life expectancy. You can see that there has been a steady progression to about 1995, 97, and just a slightly more accelerating progression. So that on average now, Maori women live to 73 and Maori men to 69. In 1900, Maori men lived on average to the age of 33 and Maori women lived to the age of 30. So two things have happened since then. The life expectancy has gone up for both Maori men and women, but it's reversed. Maori women now live longer than Maori men. And that's where you correct for the problems of childbirth, that tends to be what happens. In most developed countries, women live longer than men. They say it has got something to do with the huge amount of stress that men carry. And I know the stress that men carry is self-inflicted. But there is that's a common pattern, and in Japan, I'm told, is one of the first countries that's beginning to reduce the gender difference between men and women. The other factor to look at is mortality rates. And mortality rates for both Maori men and women, have you seen there's a slight difference here? Mortality rates for men are higher, and for women lower. They're still higher than they ought to be, but they're reducing. Most often we measure Maori progress against non-Maori progress. And there's some value in doing that, but it is not something that ought to blind us to the full view of Maori progress. Measure Maori progress over time as a more illustrative way of doing it. And there are other measures of measuring Maori progress that I will be touching on in a minute, including this one, and that is the notion of youthful vitality. Young Maori people now are healthier than they have ever been. And I say that for a number of reasons. They're taller than their parents and their grandparents were. They are more able to converse in Maori than their parents and their grandparents were. They play rugby better than their grandparents and parents did. They are more worldly wise than their grandparents and parents were. And although we read constantly about boy races and drugs and not enough exercise, those adversities are far outweighed by the sum total of the vitality of rangatahi. If you see young Maori people together doing kapahaka, playing touch rugby, enjoying themselves, they are far more vital than we were 2 or 3 generations ago, and that augurs well for the future. It would have been unthinkable to have had cohorts of Maori youth speaking to each other in Maori, while at the same time they're booking their fares to London. The other way of measuring progress is this question of agendas, Maori agendas on health. When I first came back to New Zealand from Canada in 1970 and got involved with Te Runanga o Ngāti Raukawa, which is not the biggest runanga in the country, but it's, well, I was chair of it for a while, so I know I can say this, it's the most difficult one to run. And I thought that one of our agenda items ought to be health. And people thought that was of such low priority while we had to deal with all these big land issues. So land was always on the top. It was never resolved, by the way, but it was always on the agenda, standing item. If you go to Te Runanga o Raukawa today, which I'm no longer the chairman of, health is the #1 item on the agenda. And that's the same for tribal authorities all around the country. They have identified health as a major as a major area that they should be concerned about. May not know what the answers are, but they know that it's something that concerns them and they've got to be concerned about it. So that in all sorts of agendas, education, kohanga have put health right on the top of their agenda. In all sorts of Māori organisations, health is high on the agenda. And to me, that is a measure of progress. And you might say, well, what's the point of having it on the agenda if nothing happens? The point of not having it on the agenda is for certain nothing will happen. Having it on the agenda gives people the opportunity to think about their responsibility for it. The other measure of progress that we've seen in the last 25 years is this, and I've referred to it before, is the heightened cultural identity that young people carry now that was not obvious 25 years ago. And although you will get some people in New Zealand who think that it's been all overdone, there's too much kia ora going on. And it was only 26 years ago, wasn't it, that the Prime Minister of the day said you're not allowed to say kia ora when you answer the phone. It's bad manners. That has changed in such a way now that it sounds, when you listen to TV1, it seems like it's compulsory to say it. So we've had a major turnaround culturally. New Zealand has become indigenised in a way that looked like it would be totally unacceptable. And Māori have taken a strong view now that if they're going to be Māori, they will be Māori in ways that are important to them. So cultural identity has been strengthened at a major scale. The other change has been the way in which which health knowledge has been transmitted. And quite important in the last 25 years, perhaps last 20 years in particular, is the recognition now that in all health research, whether it's research about health promotion or about biomedical research, culture and the way we look at knowledge is really important for the dissemination of knowledge. And being able to put Māori knowledge, Mātauranga Māori on the one hand, alongside health knowledge which derives from science, and to have at the interface between the two an opportunity for new knowledge to emerge has been one of the discoveries of the last 20 years. So rather than arguing, as we used to sometimes, that Mātauranga Māori knowledge is much more authentic than science, or that science is the only knowledge base that we ought to think about, we recognise now that we've got two knowledge bases. They're not the same. They don't come from this. They don't operate the same way. They don't come from the same origins. But if you put them together or alongside each other, people who work at the middle have access to innovation and to new ways of looking at the world that were not previously possible from just that view or just that view. And the other the huge change has been Māori participation in health services. Won't dwell on this, but in every type of health service, from health promotion right through to intensive care unit and emergency departments, you see now that there is quite high Māori participation. Every DHB has a senior Māori manager, and within the large DHBs there are Māori units operating, quite apart from the NGOs that operate right through the country. And my guess is about 270 Māori NGOs delivering health care of one sort or another. Well, the point for saying this is really just to make the point that in 25 years there has been a transformation in our approach to Māori health that would have been hard to anticipate if you were living in 1984, as I was. And that transformation is measured, you can measure it, by the gains in life expectancy, the reduced mortality rates, the fact that health is now fixed, it's a part of the Māori agenda, that Māori knowledge is really important to health knowledge, it's become an important component of it, that there is active Māori participation in the health sector, and that Māori leadership in the advancement of health has emerged as a large and sustainable network. Well, if you remember at the beginning of this talk, I said I was going to talk about the future. So far, I've spent all the time talking about the last 25 years, and I could just cut it short and say I can't understand what will happen in the next 25 years, so let's just